Joining me now is a woman who needs no introduction. She was my very first guest on my podcast. Please welcome Allegheny County Councilor Bethany Hallam. Bethany, welcome to the show.
I am so glad to be back.
How have you been, by the way?
Wow, I've been a lot. I think the world has flipped upside down a couple times since the last time that we did this. I've just been busy. My job as a county council member is only a part-time job. Even though I spend more hours on it than any full-time job probably would. So I work a full-time job during the day. I do my county council stuff in the evening on top of, all the other committees and boards that I'm on. So I've been staying busy.
Sounds like you got a lot on your plate and you're not making enough for it.
I've been told that before.
So talk about what you managed to accomplish on your first year on the council.
Wow. So I have been busy this year. I think that is an understatement. I will say that I think a lot of my legislation that I expected to, just be wildly supported, I was discouraged by. So a lot of the legislation that I introduced never even passed and came into law. I had a bill last night Tuesday night that I was really excited about. To give hazard pay to our corrections officers in our jail. You know me, Jonathan, the jail's my jam. And so 3 people abstained, 2 people weren't there, 6 people voted no, only 4 people voted to give the workers in charge of taking care of one of our most vulnerable populations hazard pay, in a pandemic. So anyways, working backwards, that was one of them. A couple other things. The very first thing that I did in office was the conversion therapy ban. That was something that I had campaigned on and was excited to support, first thing in office.
Has that passed statewide yet?
It has not passed statewide, but it has passed in Allegheny County. It has been implemented, but no, we're going to have to flip the Pennsylvania legislature to see conversion therapy banned statewide.
Yeah, I remember that Democrats really put a lot of energy into flipping the legislature, and it did not happen. It
did not happen because they said they put in a lot more energy than they actually did. It was, think about it, the focus has been, and I'm, of course, getting off topic because that's what we do, right?
Of course.
The focus was so heavy on beating Trump. And that's all we heard was we got to get rid of Trump, which we did need to get rid of Trump, and thankfully we did get rid of him. But the problem was that same hatred and disgust and let's get him out of here did not trickle down to the down ballot Republicans as I think everyone was hoping that it would. If we get rid of Trump and we get everybody to vote against Trump, then they'll vote against all the Republicans. And that did not happen. We actually lost control of 2 statewide row offices that we formerly had control over. We lost state House seats. We lost state Senate seats. I think a state senator from my county, I think we had talked about, his race was a tie. And
I don't remember that. Please explain this. This is the first time hearing of this, actually.
Oh my gosh. So Senator James Brewster, he is a longtime state senator in Allegheny County.
I remember this now, but go on.
Yeah, so he, after all of the ballots, after everything was said and done, it was tied. And then the next day, he was up by 1 vote. And the weird thing about this race is that the state Senate district actually crosses over county lines. So a piece of his district is actually in Westmoreland County, who has a different elections division, a different board of election, a very different electorate politically than Allegheny County does. And so he was up by 1 vote in all these. You remember, I told you a million times all the times Donald Trump sued me this year as a member of the Board of Elections.
Yes, Trump v. Hallam.
Many times. Something I never thought was going to happen. But there were so many lawsuits happening over and over again that the race, he only got officially recognized as the winner a week or 2 ago. Very recently, it dragged all the way over to when the inauguration was happening for our state legislature. They didn't swear him in because the race wasn't decided yet. So at the end of the day, after everything was said and done and all the court cases were heard, he ended up winning by 69 votes, which is unheard. Well, first of all, ha ha ha. And then second of all, what are the chances?
I wasn't going to say anything. That's on you.
You were going to say something. You were. So that stuff is what kept me busy, not just in the months leading up to the election, but in the months after as well, because we were counting ballots and then everyone was waiting on Allegheny County. And for the viewers who are watching who may not know, this year was the first year ever in Pennsylvania that we had no excuse mail-in voting. So it used to be the only way that you could vote by mail is via an absentee ballot or an overseas ballot. So in 2019, our Republican-controlled state legislature passed Act 77, which allowed, amongst some other things, no excuse mail-in voting in Pennsylvania. So we were implementing this brand new legislation, brand new method of voting for the first time in the most important election of my lifetime, and probably most people's lifetime. So it was an excursion. I think a lot of lessons were learned. For example, in Allegheny County, we sent out mail-in ballot applications to every registered voter. We were the only county in Pennsylvania that did that. We had 2/3 of our electorate vote by mail, so I was really excited about it. But anyways, it led to an exciting election season. So a lot of the work, to get back to the original question that I worked on this year was Board of Election stuff. It was making sure that everyone had the opportunity to vote by mail, and that includes incarcerated people in Pennsylvania. Incarcerated folks who aren't serving a sentence are allowed to vote. And that includes people who are in our senior centers, nursing homes, people who are homeless, and things like that. I wanted to make sure everybody was able to do it. On top of that, I wanted to make sure everybody knew how to vote by mail so that their vote would be counted. So I did a whole no naked ballot campaign where me and some other elected officials got naked and covered ourselves in mail-in ballots to just raise awareness. Don't submit a naked ballot, because that was one of the Trump court cases that said if you forget the inner envelope, your whole vote doesn't count. So I spent a lot of time working on that. I would say, what are the things going forward right now? The big things we have on the table in front of us, a paid sick leave bill that I was a primary sponsor of to guarantee paid sick leave, which is probably a foreign concept to you because you all have universal health care and all that jazz up there. But we don't even have paid sick days guaranteed for our workers. So that's one of the things I'm really excited to work on right now, and also the independent police review board. So that's my two big ones. I mean, there's a million things that I did, and there's a million things that's coming, but those are the ones that I'm most proud of and that I'm excited for going forward.
Well, you just answered my next question, which is what you want to do next year, unless you want to talk more about that. But
I want to do next year.
Okay, but I want to take this opportunity to ask. You mentioned that Republicans actually did well down ballot, and some people in the media blame progressives for that result, because people were willing to vote for Biden, but not for down ballot congressmen or women or state legislative candidates, because of the whole defund the police and abolish ICE rhetoric. You're a progressive. Why are they wrong?
How did you know I was going to say they're wrong? Because I absolutely know that they're wrong. And it's funny because a lot of the people who were saying things like that weren't even on the ground, weren't even talking to voters. These were just political pundits who, just don't understand the electorate. That's not why we lost. I would argue that not sticking to that language and messaging is something that we need to work on, that we need to gather our messaging the same way that the Republicans do. When the Republicans say we are anti-choice, we are against abortion, and we want to defund Planned Parenthood, we all know exactly what they mean when they say that. So why is it that when progressives say defund the police, everyone's like, well, what do you actually mean by that? Maybe that language is bad. You should get better at that. Like, no, we just need to all stick to that message. If that's what we're saying, defund the police, let's stick to it. I think a lot of what we did see was folks, because of COVID, not doing what we as progressives and just in general, we as Democrats do best, and that's a ground game. That's knocking on doors, that's showing up at flea markets and carnivals and talking about our candidacy and our candidates' platform positions. We didn't do that because of COVID, because we are the party of science. So we said, hey, let these Republican jagoffs go out and get COVID all they want, but we are not subjecting our volunteers to that. Okay, so while they were out knocking doors, in addition to being on TV, because they always have so much more money than us, sending out mailers, again, so much more money than us, while they were doing everything, we were just doing digital. Digital is a great component of any campaign, but it can't be all you do. Anybody who thinks that they're going to win a campaign by doing any one thing is going to lose. I've seen it. Yeah. My opponent tried it, right? And look how that worked out for him, right? So I think that overall, that's what it was. The Biden campaign at the very last minute, maybe a couple weeks, a month out from election day, started sending volunteers on the doors. So that would have been like mid-April. It was too late. It was too late.
Okay. So what's your agenda for this coming year? I'm just going to ask that.
Ooh, okay. So the first two things I said, right? Getting a police review board passed, and one that is effective, one that has teeth, one that actually is independent from the county administration. Because there's been some shitty versions of this bill floating around that completely differ from the intent of what is needed. So that's something that's going to be a lot of work. And I'm so lucky because my colleague, Olivia Bennett, who I like will fangirl over all the time because I love working with her. She has dedicated the past year to making sure that this bill gets passed and that it's done well. So I'm excited about that. Paid sick leave, same thing. We are so close. We're voting on some final amendments right now. It looks like that will be voted on within the coming month or so. Really excited for that. And then I have a whole list of things I want to do. I want to work on anti-discrimination policies in housing. I want to work on addressing environmental issues, figuring out a way that we can eliminate fracking in Allegheny County. I want to work on reallocation of funds, especially from police to, community resources that people need, right? We're spending such a large chunk of our budget every year on a police force. The Allegheny County Police, I don't know if you're familiar with, their main jobs are to the airport and the county parks. So we're spending all this money on those two things that I would argue could be handled by a different entity or handled by the Allegheny County Sheriffs, which we also have in addition to an Allegheny County Police. And what I want to see is funding diverted to where it will actually help people, because police don't keep our streets safe, right? I mean, study after study will tell you that. Police do not prevent crime. They show up after the fact and try to do something about it, right? That's actually what they're doing. So why don't we invest in things that actually do prevent crime? Why don't we invest in housing? Why don't we invest in education? Why don't we invest in workforce development and access to public transportation and treatment for folks with substance use disorder? I feel like there's so many things that we could, in healthcare, that we could be investing money in that actually makes our community safer, that actually makes Allegheny County a better place to live. And instead, people are caught up on the language because people say defund the police. Defunding the police is a reallocation of resources. If you defund them, it's not like you're just holding that money in your pocket. You're putting that money somewhere else that actually addresses the problem that society has told us police are there to solve.
So I just want to push back on that a little bit. Like, is there a role for police in Allegheny County or generally?
You mean ever?
Yeah, ever.
Not police as we know it. I definitely think that there is a public safety aspect to every society, but it doesn't involve people who are, speeding down the streets in Tesla when the kids at the school that they're driving by don't even have textbooks. I don't think that it's a suburban police force who is spending money on tanks in tear gas and rubber bullets and, high capacity munitions. And wow, we have people who are sleeping under the bridge that tank is going over. I just don't see how anyone can see that and think that that makes sense and that that is right and that's just. What I do think that I think you can have folks whose job is there's a homicide and someone shows up and investigates it. I think that that's a very different concept, right? I do think that you need people who are going to maybe ticket folks who are speeding. But again, they don't have a gun and they don't have tanks. They don't have anything that I feel resources are currently being wasted on. I do think that there needs to be a concept of public safety, but it needs to be more about community than it is about a militarized police force. I mean, we have, I don't know if this is something you guys have, like a civil service test. Is that something you have?
I think we do.
So the way it works is if you want to be a police officer, you take what's called a civil service test. And now remember, I have 130 municipalities here in the county that I represent. And there is no requirement for education. There's no requirement for a minimum salary that they need to be paid. There's no requirement for standardized training or protections. So there's 130, I think that's why I think Allegheny County is such a perfect example of this. We have 130 police forces. Well, we have 109 police forces, but 130 municipalities, 109 police forces, and nothing is standardized across them. So you might get great training here. And then you go and you work over here because this job's only paying you $12 an hour, 15 hours a week. So you need to have 2 other police force jobs at other municipalities in the county. This one has no funding, no training at all whatsoever. And that's what their rules go by. You know, like what if you came by this one and then have to work a shift over here? You have to remember that for every place that you go, every job that you work. It's just so disorganized and it doesn't lend to safety. We're seeing more overdoses in the country, not just in Allegheny County. We're seeing more overdoses in the country than we are shootings and homicides. And everyone's talking about how we can get down the homicide rate, right? No, like look at the picture that's in front of you. I'm not saying that there's no concept of public safety. What I'm saying is policing is something that we need to get out of our head. The concept, the militarization, the almost like cult-likeness of policing has only ended up in people dying. Again, not crimes being prevented. Oftentimes, not even homicides being solved. Often it's just we're seeing the negative recourses of it. And I think that there's so much more we could do to make our communities a better place than keep spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year on something that doesn't work. If you had any other department that year after year after year wasn't performing, right, wasn't working, and you were spending that much money on it, you would be reevaluating it real quick. But when I try to propose a budget amendment to the county's $2 billion budget that says I want to take $1 million from the police and give it to the Office of Violence Prevention per se, right? What's wrong with that? Why should anyone be against that? Like what we're doing isn't working. Let's try something else. It's not.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that the right does such a great job of scaring people against that concept. I mean, I saw Trump commercials where grandma's under the bed crying, calling 911, and no one's answering. It's a busy signal and saying, this is Joe Biden's America. You know, like they do such a great job as messaging and weaponizing against the messaging. We need to do a better job at unifying as let's stop beating around the bush. Let's say it how it is. Let's talk about it how we're going to talk about it. And I think once we do that, you won't hear about people complaining anymore that that's why they lost. Maybe they lost because they weren't able to pick a side. Maybe they lost because they weren't willing to speak to the messaging. I can guarantee you that any candidate, because I've seen some of them, who said that defund the police was the reason for their loss was not a candidate who actually ever committed to that. So how did it didn't hurt you? You didn't commit to it. You never said anything about it. So that's not what hurts you. Maybe pick a side. And so that's where I am right now, you know, talking about abstentions from votes and people not being willing to pick a side. I mean, that is definitely, if that's your next question, what's been the most frustrating part about this past year? That's definitely been what it is. is just, that was an aspect of governing I did not foresee.
Well, thank you for answering that question. And, given that I pushed back, I felt it was fair to give you the floor. I just wanted to make sure we get to the topics in the amount of time that we have. Let's talk about the races for Senate and governor. As you know, Tom Wolf is retiring. Pat Toomey is retiring. Who are you watching for both races?
I'm waiting for a candidate to emerge.
John Fetterman?
No, that candidate's already out there. I just think that people are getting really ahead of themselves. I'm not dissing any of the candidates who have currently already announced that they're exploring, but I also think that any candidate that I want to support is not worried about their 2022 Senate run or 2022 gubernatorial run right now, because they're worried about electing like-minded folks at the local level, and that's what we're doing this year. So
go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for someone who's like, yo, my bad. Sorry I didn't get here until 2021 for a 2022 race, but I was too busy trying to help elect people in my borough council, in my boards of commissioners, in my school boards, in my county council, and races all over the Commonwealth. If you're going to run for a statewide office, I hope you've been organizing all over the Commonwealth, electing people to these local races, to these municipal level races. That's really going to determine our future. I mean, people say it all the time. Where did Joe Biden start? At his local county council. A lot of the national level elected officials that we hear of today, that we see in the media, whose opinions we take as super valid, started on their borough council or their city council or their county council or their school board. That's where they started. And so why can we not look at that and say, okay, well, maybe that's where we should spend our time and money and resources, is building those leaders of, quote unquote, the next generation, right? So I think that there are going to be a lot of candidates that are going to announce in the coming months, in the coming year. And so I'm not going to pick one just now. We have a quarter of our bench of the Court and Common Pleas in Allegheny County this year, a quarter of our judicial bench in Allegheny County. That's never happened in my lifetime. We have half of our county council seats up. We have half of our city council seats. We're busy.
I don't want to stop you, but let's just move. You know what? I was going to ask about state legislative races, but let's talk about Allegheny County elections this year. We have like 20 minutes to do that. Let's do that.
Okay, what do you want to know about, Jonathan? Tell me.
I don't know the first thing. Let's start with the county council and go down.
Okay, cool. I like that. So there are 15 members of Allegheny County Council. That's the body that I sit on. I'm one of the two at-large members, which means I represent the whole county. Both of the at-large members were up in 2019. So
you and Sam DeMarco.
Me and Sam DeMarco, yeah. So in 2019, there are nine seats that are up every 4 years, right? So I'll be up in 2023. This year, 2021, there are 6. So that's basically how they do it. Groupings of 9 and then 6, 9, then 6. So the seats that are up this year, Tom Baker, who has, he's a Republican. He's actually the rep for the district where I grew up. He has announced he's not seeking re-election because he got a job that I guess wouldn't allow him to. So that's an open seat that I have a really badass candidate for. Next, we have.
You're gonna tease it. You're gonna tease that, aren't you?
No, it's all official now. His name's Jack Betkowski. You've probably seen him because he's my mentor. He's an amazing guy. He really helped me out in some low points in my life and really entered me into the world of politics, so I guess I should hate him for that. But he's awesome. And he really, he's a local commissioner where I grew up and does a lot of great work there. And so I'm really excited for him to take that to a county level. So far, the primary is not contested. So it's looking like, again, it was a Republican seat. So it's looking like that'll be a general competition, right?
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Next seat is Anita Prizio. She beat a Republican 4 years ago. She was the first local candidate to run endorsed by the Pittsburgh Democratic Socialists of America, which was a big deal, running against a Republican. and she won. And so she's running again. It doesn't seem that she has a primary challenge, but she may have a general challenge. There's rumors of that. I don't know. Anita's a progressive person. Who else? Bob Macy.
We can move on to the countywide offices.
Skip that one. We're gonna skip that one.
Okay.
Bob Palmasina, his seat's up. He's great. Just has a great head on his shoulders and care. Like, the only person I've ever met who probably knows everybody in his entire district by name. That's how it should be. That's constituent services, right? So his seat is up. Doesn't seem that he has a challenger. Paul Zavarella, really, really smart guy. He's an attorney. He was appointed to a vacancy when Dr. Martoni passed away a couple years ago. So he's only been on for like a year or two. And so he has to run now for the full 4 year. You know, like he got a special election 2 years ago, and now he has to run for the full 4 years. Him, and then the last one is Pat Katina, and he's our president of council. It doesn't look like he has that primary challenge.
We should definitely move on to the sheriff's race, Allegheny County Sheriff, because I just saw.
Do this to me.
Oh, you don't want to talk about that?
Absolutely, we'll talk about it. You're just trying to get me all pissed off before I have to go to meetings all night.
Okay, well, let's do that, because I just saw Dom Costa is running for Allegheny County Sheriff. Is that the Dom Costa I am thinking of?
That is the same Dom Costa who got destroyed in his Democratic primary as a long-term incumbent in his own backyard for state representative when Sarah Innamorato came into the picture. Literally, she took him and wiped the floor with him, okay? And now he goes away for a little bit. And now, 3 years later, he's back thinking we all forgot how after he lost his primary and was publicly humiliated, how after that happened, he tried to run a write-in campaign to be on the Republican ticket. That didn't work. They were handing out fake slate cards at my poll on election day. And then he, in his followers, you want to call them, had some like socialist Sarah campaign where they had this like party Americans Against Socialism pact that they started and put up all these nasty signs all over. Like, dude, you lost your own neighborhood, and now you think for whatever reason that the county has regressed over the past 3 years and that anyone's going to vote for you. The district attorney's son is running his campaign. It's like old school establishment politics. Like, it's old school. Like, you haven't learned your lesson. You want to get beat again. And the other thing about it all is it's not even like there was nobody running, so he decided, hey, what the hell, right? It's not even like that. The person who is running against him is currently the deputy sheriff. He has literally worked his ass off through the ranks, started as a cop in the north side, and has been busting his ass ever since, working up through the ranks under our current sheriff, who's been there. Sheriff Mullen's been there for a long time. And he is just the most patient man in the world. He is such a nice guy. He truly believes in service. Like, that's
the GOAT.
What? What's that?
The GOAT, the greatest of all time.
The GOAT. Wait, I thought that was me.
Oh, yes, of course.
No, but really, he believes over anything else in service, and that's like what his entire career has embodied. And so he's not a politician, right? And he'll tell you that. He'll tell you, I'm absolutely not a politician. So the fact that he has to campaign for a job that he's really been doing his whole life is, I think, what's going to be the hardest part, because Dom doesn't care about the service. Dom doesn't care about the community. Dom cares about Dom. And we've seen that in how he's acted when he was a legislator, and how he acted when he is campaigning against a progressive challenger that whooped his ass. We've seen who he is. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Kevin Krause has shown us who he is and what kind of sheriff he will be. And Dom Costa has showed us who he is and like everything that we don't want. And it's such a shame that Dom Costa is trying to run a campaign as this progressive voice. I mean, he's campaigning on no-knock warrants and community policing and
keeping no-knock warrants?
No, getting rid of them. This is the same guy who yeah. Wait, you think anybody campaigns on keeping them?
I don't know. I just thought, never mind.
Yeah, so anyways, he is putting on this show. And I'm just trying to make sure nobody's falling for it.
This has been Bethany Hallam's Minute of Rage.
You did it. That's your fault.
And if there are no other countywide offices on the ballot, then I would like to ask you about the Pittsburgh mayoral race, because I've been seeing that is heating up.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely heating up. It's the most talked about race in Pittsburgh, maybe.
Yeah, Summer Lee has been talking about it.
So, yeah, there's a lot. I'm waiting to see what happens. There's 4 candidates that I know of in the race. So I know everybody keeps talking about the current mayor, Ed Gainey, who's a state representative, Tony Moreno, who's a former cop, and then there's a guy named Will Parker. 2 of those candidates sought the endorsement of the Allegheny County Democratic Committee. That's Ed Gainey and Tony Moreno. The current mayor did not seek the party's endorsement, which is like a thing that people have been doing. You know, people have, my history and my beef with the Allegheny County Democratic Committee, Jonathan. I don't need to.
We weren't going to talk about it. We are now going to talk about it. It's your fault.
I was trying not to talk about it. So anyways, there are a lot of candidates who are announcing via press releases that they are not going to seek the endorsement. It costs $10,000 to seek the endorsement for mayor. This is to ask the Democratic Party to support you. $10,000 for judicial candidates, $8,000. So you're asking somebody to throw all this money in the race early in the race, and if they lose, you don't get your money back. They spend that on your opponent.
You mentioned the judicial races that are happening in Allegheny County. You mentioned that earlier?
Yes. We have
talk about that.
We have 9 seats on the Court of Common Pleas. Pennsylvania also has some of the statewide appellate courts. We have 2 Commonwealth Court seats. We have 1 Superior Court seat, and we have 1 Supreme Court seat. But in Allegheny County, we have 9 Court of Common Pleas seats and like 21 magisterial district judge seats. So there is a lot of lawyers trying to be a judge right now. Actually, magistrates don't even have to be, you don't even have to be a lawyer to be a magistrate. So that's interesting too. But yeah, so there's a lot of money being spent. Historically, the way you become a judge is you pay for it, right? You just like have enough money that
seriously
you have more money. I mean, not buy it, but like you go on TV and you send out mailers and you can afford the works, right? But like, think about a public defender. Our public defenders are paid horribly. How do you get public defenders as judges if you have to be rich to become a judge? So that's what's so cool about this year is usually there's maybe 1 seat, maybe 2, maybe, and now we have 9 because there was a ballot referendum that happened where it raised the age for judges to retire. It went from 70 to 75. And so that's now happening and it's kicking in. And so there's a whole bunch of judges that are retiring. And so a lot of open seats, really a chance to just shape the bench for future generations. I'm just so excited about it. But that's what I've been spending a lot of my time on because there's so many seats and because I don't think it should be pay to play, especially when we're talking about our criminal legal system, because I think that's how we got where we are today. One of the reasons. So I'm trying to make sure we get magistrates that are in there who are like really about justice and not about punishment. I'm making sure we have Court of Common Pleas judges who actually represent the direction that the system's going. Because you're a judge for life. You may go up for retention every 10 years, but nobody doesn't get retention. So once these people are elected, you're a judge for life. You could be a 32-year-old judge right now, lawyer running for judge right now and get elected judge and be one till the day you don't want to be anymore.
I've got some bad news. Unless you have any other races you want to talk about in Allegheny County, I think we've exhausted them and we still have a few minutes left.
Well, there are some other ones because there's the city council races, but they're all unopposed as far as I know so far. Every single city council race is unopposed.
You know when the filing deadline is?
Well, it hasn't even happened yet. So our petition season only starts on February 16th.
Wow.
So February 16th to March 9th is our petition day, is our petition timeline. But you hear if someone's running, right? You know, it's not, you can't like keep it secret because you got to be planning how you're going to get your signatures and stuff like that. So it's never a secret. I know something cool that we can talk about. My jam is the jail. We've talked about this all the time. If there's one thing I could bitch about for hours and hours and hours on end, it's the Allegheny County Jail. So there is a group called the Alliance for Police Accountability, who is doing collecting signatures right now to get a solitary confinement ban on the ballot. So the way that our charter works is that to get something, if you want to get something put into law without going through the legislative body, you can get 27,000 signatures and get the ordinance on the ballot for the voters to vote for in the primary election. So they're in the process right now of a lot of work to try to get this thing on the ballot to ban solitary confinement in the Allegheny County Jail. It would be revolutionary if it happens. And so there's been a lot of work happening around that. And the other cool thing about it is because they're gathering petition signatures before candidates are even doing it, they're kind of paving the way for how do you get petition signatures in a pandemic? Like we're still in a pandemic here,
Right. Can I ask you about next year's state legislative elections or that
No, I mean, you can ask me about next year's state legislative election. If you're talking about like challengers to any races, I have not heard a single one. The only thing I've heard about 2022 is people trying to hypothesize who's running for Senate and who's running for governor. But what do you want to know about state legislative races?
I'm thinking about who's going to run against Mike Doyle, to be very honest.
Oh, I mean, a lot of people thought that district was going to be phased out, whatever you call it, because of the census and new legislative districts being drawn.
But isn't Allegheny County going to get at least one district?
We have Connor Lamb.
Right, so he's gonna find himself in that seat.
Yeah, so that's what I've always heard. I have no idea because this isn't like set in stone. But what I've always heard is that whenever the redistricting happens, Allegheny County will have like one congressional seat instead of two.
Interesting. I wonder how they're gonna because Allegheny County struck me as a bit big for that.
Well, I represent the whole county. And I don't even have staff. It's not even a full-time job, so I don't want to hear it.
Okay. I'm sort of just improvising here. Sorry for putting you on the spot there.
No, you're not putting me on the spot, but really, I haven't heard anybody talk about challenges to state legislative race. I haven't heard anything like that because we've challenged so many of the dinos that like most of them are gone.
Well, there's so few left. I'm thinking of Brandon Markusek, Anita Kulik, Dan Deasy. Those are the people who are on my mind who are just in Allegheny County.
Yeah, and then also you have the seats that are red, right? So when Turzai resigned, Emily Skopov tried for that seat and lost, so that's still a red seat. Lori Mizgorski's seat, remember Lissa Geiger-Schulman was running for that, so I think we'd take another attempt at that one. He was the House Minority Leader, Frank Dermody, lost his House seat. That's in Allegheny County, so that's a red seat now. So we have races already on our hands to flip seats. As far as primaries, we've been doing pretty good at that.
Okay, I think that those three that I mentioned are probably on notice because as I mentioned with my conversation with Joe Szymanski last night, you're basically building a competition to the Pennsylvania Democratic machine, from what I'm seeing.
I'm sure trying, but I'm not doing it by myself. There's people all over the Commonwealth who are doing this and who are organizing to get rid of the trash and bring in the change because we've waited so long for change to happen and they keep telling us just keep waiting, it's coming, and that we should settle for this incremental change. We're sick of it. We realize that, the power of the people is always stronger than the people in power. So we're just organizing because we're realizing that works. When we all come together, there's strength in numbers, and that's how we win. And so I love seeing it personally.
Okay, so before you go, I do want to mention that John Fetterman, I think, has supported legalizing marijuana in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Connor Lamb voted no on that bill on the federal level. Why should marijuana be legalized? Keep in mind, I support it. I think you support it, but why should it be done?
I mean, wait, why should?
Okay, I phrased that wrong. I am bad at improvising.
I can tell you all the reasons. I can tell you a reason why it should be illegal. Okay, how about I'll give you the number one reason that anybody shouldn't be able to argue with. I would say the tax revenue that could be generated by it and what that money could go for. Put that tax revenue towards infrastructure, towards funding our public school system, towards free community college, towards, anything.
What's the biggest obstacle then? Why hasn't it passed yet?
Because my guess would be it has to do with like a big pharma thing. So for example, my dad has a medical cannabis card. My dad has Parkinson's disease and heart disease and a whole lot dementia, a whole lot of problems. And before medical cannabis was legal, he was on so many pills every day. His heart medicines, conflicted with his brain medicines, and then his brain medicines conflicted with his heart medicines. It was a mess. He gets his medical cannabis card, and he's taking like a couple pills a day. And it made him his quality of life so greatly improved with a plant that we could grow in our backyard. We don't, but we know that we could. So I credit John Fetterman for bringing legalizing recreational cannabis into the mainstream. I just want everyone to be cautious that if and when recreational cannabis is legalized, it has to come with a component of restorative justice and of making sure that people who were harmed by the illegalization of it, by the prohibition of it, are now rectified, that we're letting people out of jails and prisons who are in there simply for cannabis related charges, that we're granting pardons and expunging records of people who have had convictions for those things. So I just want to make sure that any talk about that has that component as well. And to be fair, I mean, a lot of people are racist, and who has the war on drug harm more than anyone else? Black and brown people, right? So if you want to know what's the biggest obstacle, I would argue, is racism, because everything else makes sense. Whether you're looking at it from a fiscal point of view or a social point of view, everything makes sense. The only thing that ever comes to mind is you want to make sure that the black and brown people in prison can't come out and organize. I have no idea what other reason.
My theory was that it's Republicans.
You should ask Fetterman, though, because he did a 67 county listening tour where he literally went everywhere, even to the reddest of red counties, and talked to people about it.
I realize we're running up against a deadline here. I definitely want to have you back on this show.
Jonathan, I will be back. I'm not your first guest for nothing. I was your first guest so that I could be a continuing guest for the rest of your life. You're just stuck with me.
I am definitely stuck with you. Bethany, thank you